kick things off by just saying thank you to both of you for being here. We're very excited to be part of this conversation. This is our Future of series that we're doing, and we've done a few already, and we will continue to do them. And they're meant to bring together leaders from different industries, talking about their experience, and of course, sharing practical tips and steps for all of us to learn from each other and actually initiate some of the change that we all want. So I'll start off by just introducing both of you. We have Ilan Zachar with us today, who is the CTO of Carr Properties. Ilan has so much wealth of information to share. Hopefully some of you have seen him at, speaking at events or webinars, and I hope you will kind of get to see him shine his light today, which is very exciting. I will let Ilan, of course, give his own bio in a second, but I just wanted to preface, how much of an innovative mind he is. And I believe that him and Carr really prioritize tenants and their needs, and it really shows in the initiatives that they create as a company, and that also Ilan creates for his own kind of technology sector. So I'm excited for you all to hear his perspective on it as well. And then we have Serene, of course, who is the CEO of Senseware. Serene is an incredible individual, very, very smart, as I'm sure you will soon see for yourselves. Senseware is an IoT company that works with in the commercial real estate space that essentially brings together data from the physical world into the cloud. And Serene is the co-founder of the company, so she developed the technology along with Julian Stamatakis, and the company has over 40 patents. Serene holds 12 of those patents herself. So just an incredible individual who has also so much to share about this particular topic of IoT in the CRE space. So it'll be great to hear from her, and combine the two together. It's going to be an awesome webinar, no doubt about that. So why don't we just kick things off with Ilan, if you'd like to share a little bit more about your background, and then Serene, if you could do the same, that would be perfect.
Sure. So I'm Ilan Zachar. I'm the CTO for Carr Properties. I've been with Carr for the last 5 years. I've been a CIO, CTO in the commercial real estate space for the last 21 years. Started with more shopping centers, and then shopping centers within the United States, supermarket anchored shopping centers. Then I branched over into Canada, and from there moved into Europe, where I was overseeing a portfolio of shopping centers, as well as malls in Eastern Europe, Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Latvia, Russia. And then decided to take a little bit of a break and come back to the US, where things are a little bit more calm. So joined Carr, worked a lot on the traditional stuff, but I think that in the last 2.5 years, we've really been focusing on the OT, IoT space. We were already starting to work with Serene a little bit pre-COVID, and then once COVID hit, it just helped us escalate the projects that we were working with, that anything that dealt with IAQ and IEQ, that Senseware has been an integral help in our process.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Serene, would you like to share a little bit more about your background?
Of course. I'm very happy to have you here with us, Ilan. I am Serene Almomen, the CEO and co-founder of Senseware. We started the company with a vision to connect the physical environment and get real-time data at people's fingertip. And we wanted to make sure that we do it in a very easy way. We have had that idea of making sure technology is easy from our background, working in the healthcare space and developing technologies for doctors and whatnot before Senseware. And we realized that in order for technology to transform industries like healthcare, like real estate, and the built environment, it needed to be really easy. And so we brought a lot of the learnings from that those times into what we have done with Senseware. And I think a lot of our customers can attest to that. So that's been our focus and what we've developed so far. And we are happy to see that the market is really appreciating digitization and getting real-time data from CRE and the built environment, and hope to play a role in helping with that new transformation.
Thank you, Serene. I just want to share that anyone who has any questions, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So there is a Q&A feature where you can just put it in the chat box and we'll make sure to answer all the questions. We have some time reserved specifically for that. So I'd love to kick it off with Serene sharing your first conversation that you had with Ilan. I've heard you talk about it, and I think everyone else would really value from hearing it as well.
Yes, and you know, I keep saying this to people, but I'm really serious when I say that the first conversation with Ilan was the most memorable I had with a CETO in the CRE industry. And the reason it was memorable is that it just felt that Ilan really mapped out all of the areas of improvement in the CRE industry, and then layered that with the technology that can help modernize existing CRE infrastructure. And then layered on top of that, what do we do when you know, we start to get and know and modernize the infrastructure, and had already put together a extensive data strategy, very well thought of strategy. And it just, as he was talking about it, it felt that it's so easy. Everyone can do this. And that's, and it's actually, it's not, and it, I'm sure, required a lot of thinking and investigation and talking to new companies and innovative organizations to come up with that vision. And I actually feel like I want you to hear more directly from him about that vision. So if you could share what you know, what you told me, I think everyone would be extremely impressed. Ilan.
Thank you, Serene. It's a great representation and introduction for me. So thank you very, very much also for being here. I wanted to, so a little bit to what you said before. So we look at data. It was very important for us to understand data as not, and, you know, I'm going to take a step back and not specifically talk about IEQ and IEQ, but mainly talk about data analytics and how data actually plays a role inside of Carr. And the way, you know, I'll give a little bit of an analogy. Everyone understands blockchain, and everyone talks about Bitcoin. And the minute people hear Bitcoin, people say blockchain, they immediately think of Bitcoin. In reality, the way I look at it, IoT for me is the whole blockchain environment. Is a huge space, but it also that incorporates into data analytics as well. And then and each one of them has like a little segment inside of it. And I'll say IAQ is the Bitcoin of blockchain, is the Bitcoin of data analytics and IoT. And the way I interpret this is because when we started looking at data analytics, it was very important for us that we understood what to do with the data. And we looked at a couple of scenarios. One scenario was, how do we decouple the data from its source? Because what we realized is that when the data is attached to the source, and everyone has very good portals and very good areas where you can look at the data and manage the data, and Senseware has a great portal to manage all of the data that comes from Senseware, but it restricted us to work only with the data, only with your data in your portal, and not look at other pieces of data that are sitting somewhere else. So we wanted to decouple the data from their sources into one place that we can actually start moving it around and use it. In addition to that, we wanted to give a single pane of glass so everyone can look at the data in one single place. So now you can look at multiple data in one place. Next step, we wanted to make the data actionable, and what are we going to do with the data itself? And now we're moving into the automation phase. But what was important for us at the beginning is we looked and we mapped and we created this picture of almost like a brain, where the building stands as a brain. And I said, you know, and I came in with a statement saying that the building is just another employee in the company. And the reason he's just an employee in the company is because the building senses, the building has something to say, the building can help us, the building works during the day, it rests during the night, and when it has a problem, it knows how to tell us that there is a problem too. And we started mapping all of the different pieces, anywhere from access control and gym and environmentals and BMS, EMS, energy, all of these pieces that come and flow and data that flows through the building itself, and said, okay, how do we now slowly take this information and one by one start mapping it out. And the idea was that as we take this information in individually, create standard models for everything, and we can talk about that a little bit later too, is about different types of models of the data, and then be able to start looking at the data, and then further, you know, in the process, which we are past it today, is start layering data one on top of another. Occupancy with air quality, together with the temperature that is outside, together with you know, the expectations of, you know, because of COVID. So all of these were very important for us, and then we embarked on capturing the data sets and developed the process of taking data at the beginning, processing it, testing it, validating it, and then going at it all over again. And it seems that the process every time now becomes faster and faster, because we know how to process, bring in new data sets in an easier way.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to hear kind of where you're at now in that process. I know it's a long process that you've kind of taken over and you've endeavored on. Where are you at this stage now?
So we took a very different process. I'm not going to tell you that it was a, and I'm going to talk now specifically on the IEQ side of it. We took a different approach. Maybe it was forced upon us, but in retrospect, that was the right thing to do that. So at the beginning, we started off, I'm going to say a year and a half ago, where we took different types of sensors and we tested those sensors and wanted to learn more about the sensors and what the sensors can do for us. So we laid out multiple companies, multiple brands in front of us, and we understood that different sensors treat different rooms, and we have different expectations from the sensors too. If it's in a stairwell, if it's in a lobby, if it's in a gym, in an office, in a conference room, and every sensor had its nuance of what it needed to do. It was also very important for us to say that if this sensor is very good for our conference room, and this sensor we're going to use in the restrooms of the gym, we want to know that if somebody talks CO2 is CO2 across the board, right? And they will both measure exactly the same when put in the same space, but then we were going to separate them because one should be really work better in a conference room and was meant more to work in that location. So that was the first thing that we did. Next, what we did is we took a property and we flooded it with sensors. So from the sensor side of it, we implemented bipolar ionization. We wanted to check the bipolar ionization is working correctly. We wanted to look at the CO2. We wanted to look at the humidity. We wanted to look at ozone. We wanted to look at, a lot of things, and we wanted to look at them in individual locations and places. You would be surprised that in the older buildings where people think that the air quality and the air flows in a specific way, that it actually, in some cases, it surprised even our top engineers that it was not. And the sensors actually showed us in exactly what was going on within those spaces themselves. So we learned where to position the sensors, what to expect from the sensors, how to aggregate our data, because we have different sensors from different locations. So we wanted to know how to aggregate all of that information into one place. And now we're at a point that we can roll out all of our other properties. And again, this process took time. When you think about it, you're going to go through your board and it's going to take you, I don't know, probably a month to get the approval. And then it's going to take you another month, a month and a half to order the equipment and to implement it. Now you need data, right? So you're going to wait 2-3 months to accumulate data. And then if you put everything in the right place, you can start understanding what to do with the data. But if you didn't understand your sensors and you put them in different places and the data didn't make sense to me, they didn't make sense to you, you're starting the process all over again. we're at the point right now that we know exactly where every sensor goes in every one of our buildings. And we're at the point right now that that's what we're actually doing. We're flooding all of our buildings with sensors, but we're at the point right now that the data that will come in is actionable day one.
That's awesome. Serene, I'd love for you to talk to us about, can you only make a newer building smart, or how should someone think through that if they have an older building?
Definitely not just new buildings smart. In fact, as we know that real estate is the largest asset class in the world, and the majority of it is existing building. And when we actually talk about getting a building smart so that it's more efficient and whatnot, we really need to think more about existing infrastructure, because those are the buildings that need the most help, because as building ages, it becomes inefficient and obsolete in some cases. So, we really need to make sure that we take care of existing infrastructure and improving those. And that's why we look, for us at Senseware, we really recognize that existing infrastructure is a big opportunity and ripe for modernization. So we thought about that in a different aspect of the technology. So first of all, we use wireless-based technology so that it's easily retrofitted in a space in a very non-intrusive way. You go to where the data source that you want, you connect, all you need is power, you go to the next location, and everything is communicating wirelessly. So it works really well, in a retrofit capacity in buildings, in existing building. We use things like mesh technology, which means that all the different data points are connecting to each other and getting to the cloud through a daisy chain, if you will, type architecture. And in that way, we could take the shape of any building that we're in, small, big, and whatnot. So makes that path to making the building smart easier. We've built a library of bridges that can connect to all types of outputs that are coming from the different sensors and equipment that are in the building, no matter what their age is, And this makes it also easier to go to any building and not have to change a specific equipment or sensor for us to be able to get the data from, and make it even easier to retrofit, make smart, and all of those things. We also require only one internet access point. That's through our gateway. This is because it's also, when you're looking at retrofitting a building to get real-time data, you don't want to have to extend internet access to each data point all the way in the basement and up, to the roof. So, having just one place where you have to connect to the internet just makes it easier. So there's just all of these small pieces together makes it easier to make smarter building, make existing buildings smarter, and get data from them, and create an easier path to digitize the CRE environment.
I'm going to reinforce something that Serene said, is that we actually, when we deployed our sensors, it actually pointed out that existing HVAC sensors were malfunctioning. So and we saw that based on understanding that there were drifts on the sensors. So there were a couple of floors that were showing certain things while other floors were showing something different, which raised a flag that something may be wrong, even though the sensors to the BMS system were showing that everything is working okay. When they went to look at the actual sensors, they saw that they were miscalibrated, and that eventually either had to recalibrate them or had to replace them. And a lot of these older buildings, these sensors have been there for a very, very long time, and everyone is taking for granted that what they're actually displaying and showing is the actual data that really should be coming through. But then we realize when we put the more modern sensors and maybe a little bit more sensitive sensors, they actually pick up certain information that that help us calibrate and move the other sensors in a better way.
That's great. Ilan, I'd love to hear from you. There's a lot of standards out there, well building standard, Fitwell, and so many others. How do you think about those standards? How do you like to use them or maybe not? And what are your thoughts?
So I think you need the standards because everyone at the end of the day wants to see that a third party is willing to certify you. So somebody has to come from the outside and say, yes, we came in, we checked, and we know that Carr Properties is okay. And we know that, and we've done that. We did it with Fitwell, and we did it as well with UL. But what we are learning is that there's standards that are going to come out that are not going to be like a one-time a year certification, but it's going to be really your certification is that you are on an ongoing doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that that is really the standard that we want to look for, because you can get ready for an audit, you can get ready, you can prepare your building for whatever needs to get done. And then in most of these audits, you're never going to really say that my building had a problem and then I fixed it and now it's okay. Usually what will happen is they will find a problem, they will fix it, and then they will come back and they will say, okay, you fixed it, so the report now is going to look good. But if you're on an ongoing, and really what they're auditing is they're not auditing your existing right now when we came and did the audit, but they're looking at your over time data. At that point, it's much more difficult to sort of like say, let me just fix the problem, because you should have fixed it a long time ago. And that's what I see as new standards for auditing or for reporting are going to be, which are going to make the owners have to implement and roll out real-time, over time, collect the data, sensors inside of their properties. In addition to that, for new construction, we're already doing some work in our new construction that we're already implementing the sensors, at least on the base building equipment, because we don't really know what our customers are going to do in their own space, so base building and amenity spaces. But I believe that very soon there will become a standard, very similar to how Florida in 1978, after Hurricane Andrew, forced everyone to build with hurricane-proof windows or have to have shutters. Same thing will happen over here, that there will be developed standards, indoor standards. Unfortunately, we don't have indoor standards today. We have only outdoor standards, but the indoor standards are going to be much more strict, and they will be part of an audit before a building receives their certificate of occupancy.
Serene, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, and this is actually just to add to what Ilan was saying, and I learned this recently, that UL added a new or released a new guidance document called UL 2906. And basically, this is part of their verified healthy building mark, just a certification or audit. But this new guidance is saying that if a building owner, manager, or occupier wishes to utilize an IAQ sensor strategy in their efforts to earn and maintain the verified healthy building mark, they won't be required to undergo the mid-year IAQ inspection. And I think that's a very interesting development in the world of certification auditing buildings, because it does combine technology and the reality of usage of the space, which it just changes, so dynamic, it changes by the day. So a one and done certification needs to, that whole approach needs to be modernized. So it was nice to see that this new guidance has been released, and it speaks to the continuously ensuring healthy and safety of the indoor spaces, which I think is a good direction.
And I will confirm, because UL actually told us that we don't need the second stage now.
Oh, wow. That's
yes.
Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Ilan, so obviously right now you're thinking about a lot of different things when it comes to IoT in your buildings. Is IAQ the biggest thing that's occupying your headspace right now, or what are the things that you're focused on?
IAQ is a critical layer that we're looking right now, because especially on the bringing back everyone from the back into work, it's very important. It's interesting if you look up Collier's, was one of our peer competitor to us, but it's a real estate company. They brought out a manual of for companies what to do when you come back, and their technology package is actually saying, do you have IAQ and indoor sensors ready, right? And which we think is mandatory to be. And needless to say, all of the other REITs that are out there are doing this the same thing. But it just shows on how important IAQ and IEQ is so important. I mean, I'm at home right now, but I can go and I can open up my window. I have certain standards of air quality within my house that I'm going to come into my office right now, and I'm going to want to have that standard there. Speaking with some of my colleagues in New York, you can see that the streets of New York are full, right? People are in restaurants, people are everywhere, but the office buildings are empty. And the reason being is because the customers within the building are a little bit weary or afraid of bringing in the customers in, because they don't really know what is the owner doing in order to protect their customers that are coming into the building itself. So I think that that developing a standard, as well as putting a very high level of importance on IAQ and IEQ is very, very important, because that will also help us bring our customers back. And we're already, we have some sensors in our amenity spaces, and some of the customers that are familiar with our building are walking around. What is this? Why is this over here? What are you doing for IAQ in order to get better air quality within the building itself? And having this analytic information and being able to talk to them about the programs that we're actually doing is giving comfort to the customers to come back.
Yeah, makes sense. Serene, when the conversation turns to IAQ, sometimes questions around accuracy with the sensors come up. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I cannot emphasize enough how sensor accuracy and quality matters. In the world of engineering where I come from, we used to say garbage in, garbage out. So it's kind of the same thing here. If we're using the sensor data to improve our health and wellness in the space, we need to know that we're getting accurate, high quality data. And so we have seen, because of the rush and the increased awareness in indoor air quality, we've seen a lot of solutions come to market, but unfortunately, we've seen a lot of counterfeit types of sensors used in some of those solutions and whatnot. So it's why we encourage a lot of everyone we talk to inquire about what's the manufacturer of the sensors, the accuracy level, the original innovator of the specific tech. We're seeing a lot of innovation around CO2 and around particulate matter sensors. Who is the original technology and organization that developed, this, and try to source from those types of manufacturers. And I also want, there's the accuracy of the sensor. Obviously, high quality is important, but also we want to know, we want to balance between, the sensor and how sensitive it is compared to the application. So for example, if you're using the particulate matter sensor to verify that your filtration is working properly, then you would need a sensor, a PM sensor that measures submicron levels. But if you're just using it for space monitoring, then a PM 2.5 could be sufficient. So there's that aspect of things. So it's really important to first make sure that you get the best sensor from a quality perspective, but then also map the sensor sensitivity and accuracy levels based on what you're trying to answer and to sense, and based on the strategy that you're employing in place.
Makes sense. I'll ask a few more questions, and we have so many already in the Q&A box, which we will hopefully get to all of them shortly. I wanted to get your thoughts, both of you, on how you think about security as it relates to gathering all this data, and how you sort of think about that. Ilan, you're on mute.
So yeah, so security for us is up at the utmost importance, and we developed an asset cybersecurity platform that allows us to to protect our buildings and all of the IoT devices. Now, every IoT device, every sensor that we put in here. Now, if Serene sends me a SIM together with and it's to connect it to their gateway, I don't have to worry about it because it's all embedded and enclosed within her own system, and Senseware has to be responsible for that. But sometimes we have to roll it out, and we have to within our Wi-Fi network or within our wired network within the building itself, and that requires us to be very strict with regards to which doors we open, how we monitor the information coming in and out. So we do have our asset cyber package that every time we implement something like this, we have to go through the questionnaire, and we have to verify and validate that the data is actually moving correctly. Somebody unplugged one of Serene's sensors today and plugged a regular computer into it, even though the data would be normal data coming out of a computer, but it wouldn't be the normal data that we would be expecting to see out of the sensor. We would be flagged, and we would be told that something is wrong on that network.
That's great. On our side, obviously, security is very important. And we do all of the things that are expected, from encrypting the entire network and all the way to the cloud. But one of the things from an architecture point of view that we did consciously related to security is that we have our own network that is created in the building. It doesn't tap into the network, the Wi-Fi or whatever other network in there. So it's its own wireless network that just adds another layer of security to the installed infrastructure. So just wanted to add that piece.
Serene, could you share a little bit more about, obviously, Senseware is an IoT company, but you've done a lot with IAQ over the years, and now obviously more. So I'd love to hear from you how you've seen IAQ, indoor air quality specifically, blossom over the past year.
Yeah, we did start in the indoor air quality monitoring space almost 6 years ago. And it was started by a client that was in the West Coast that were suffering from the wildfire and wanted to understand how it's affecting the indoor spaces. And so asked us to integrate as particulate matter sensor, other air quality sensors to help them with that issue. And over the years, we improved on that. Obviously, with last year and COVID, there was a heightened awareness around the whole concept of sick building syndrome and the need to improve the air we breathe and know that we're always breathing good air. So definitely the whole solution around IQ monitoring on our platform has increased tremendously, which is great because we've always known that a lot of buildings and indoor spaces don't have ideal air quality. So I think it's really great to see that increased awareness. And we do feel that at some point, like Ilan says, it's going to be non-negotiable to have monitoring of air quality in all types of indoor spaces.
I mean, in the past, right? If even today, right? Today, not so much. But if I was 10 years ago, I would tell you that, we really want to have some design that somebody can open up the window and get some air from outside. People would look at you and say, "You're crazy. What are you talking about?" Because we want to keep the air inside. We want to be able to cool it. We want to refresh it. There's energy. There's consumption. Now, little by little, we're realizing that we need to bring in more air from the outside. We need to circulate it a lot more. And all these sensors are helping us in order to understand it. But the whole LEED certification, now there's a huge argument with regards to, do we keep our buildings healthy or do we keep our building energy efficient, right? And that's sort of like a big thing with regards to where we're going to be going. But this is going to be a challenge now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And with that, when it is you're trying to optimize competing priorities like that, that's where really data and analytics can become handy, because we're not talking about a linear issue here. It's a complex issue. Our human minds cannot figure out a formula to do it alone. So data becomes really a key ingredient in this whole new trend that we're seeing. And
yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to using your sensor for our sorry about that. Your backup.
We'll pause on Ilan. Oh, little doggy. That's always fun. We'll have Serene, and then we'll come back to you once the doggy settles. Serene, Ilan mentioned earlier calibration of sensors and all of that. And so I'd love to hear from you how you think about calibration at Senseware with your sensors.
Yeah. We're just going to focus on the indoor air quality type sensors with this question. That's typically what triggers that type of question. So all of the sensors that we use are factory calibrated. Once installed, the CO2 sensor, volatile organic compound or VOC sensors automatically adjust and reach full accuracy within 24 or 48 hours, although they're continuing to read before that as soon as they're installed. The temperature and humidity and PM sensors do not need to be calibrated once installed. All the sensors just have really low drift, and their life expectancy is more than 10 years. So we have developed on top of all of that, an algorithm to automatically detect when a sensor is out of specification, so that we're aware, and if we need to replace that sensor, we will do it in that way. So using technology to continuously keep the readings as expected.
Thank you, Serene.
I'm back. Sorry about the noise before that. It's working from home. Things that happen once in a while. Very engaged, so that's good. They also believe in air quality. So what I was going to say is that, Serene, you said about data analytics. Data analytics is critical for this, and you'll be able to have to collect the data and develop your standards within the company, and then understand your current. And then, like I said before, we're using your BACnet interpreter that is allowing us to pull all of the data out of our HVAC system. And very soon, we're going to now start talking back to our equipment. So looking at a lot of industry, emerging technologies that are happening in the industry today that know how to take all of this data and process it, and then be able to modify and tweak the equipment to provide energy efficient modifications and changes to be able to optimize the air quality, but at the same time, keep the energy consumption down.
Makes sense. Thank you, Ilan. I wanted to ask, obviously there's a lot of questions about the cost. There's costs obviously with implementing all of this, and then there's going to be hopefully a big benefit that comes into play. So Serene, maybe you could kick it off by just sharing what are some of the tools beyond you're giving people data. Okay, that's great. They need that. How do they justify those costs? What are some of the tools that you may have created that helps them justify those costs?
Yeah, so we are doing things like making sure that the data is meaningful. That's the first thing, that there's something that could be done when you look at the data. So some of the things we added is things like the ventilation performance index. So you don't have to look at specific data. It's telling you that this, how is your ventilation? So it's just a specific tie to a specific issue that can be addressed, so that you're then improving that, and then making sure that there is you're continuing to make the air healthy and whatnot. So that's one tool that we have. We've seen that a lot of, like Ilan was saying, people don't want to go into indoor spaces because they're weary of how it's going to be, and if it's going to be healthy or not. So we're collecting data, but it's all about creating some comfort level. So some of the tools we developed are around, making that data available to the public. So things like lobby view that shows the data subset that is meaningful to, any person, to understand that, okay, this place is monitoring air, it looks okay, so that we can try to drive traffic back into office spaces. So those are a couple of things that have been used to really help bring value to the investment that are taken to install under air quality monitoring.
Ilan, would love to hear your thoughts on this.
You're talking about the data standards?
No, so Serene was finishing up about how do you justify the costs for.
Well, so I've been answering also some of the questions on the
I know,
side
that's
too.
great.
So
Thank you for doing that. We have a ton. Wonderful.
So an issue of cost always comes up, and how do you justify the cost? And we just had a meeting with our board, and we can justify the cost very easily on our amenity spaces, because it's part of the building that we are responsible for, the indoor space of the customers themselves. Because we're office buildings, we cannot really justify, or we cannot actually tell our customers that we're going to be putting these in their spaces to measure what is happening there. So we're going to allow them to come up with their own rationale, and then eventually maybe they will request us to come in and do this work for them. But what but where we do justify it is because we're trying to make our buildings better. And I know that this could be also a level of competitive edge. Very soon you'll have customers that are going to come in and say, I will rent space within your building. What does your building do for wellness and hospitality and amenity spaces and health, and what kind of programs do you have in place? So I think that is a justification. It's a marketing right now. We'll call it marketing. It's going to be very predominant within sustainability reports, ESG reports. But also people need to understand that this is a recoverable expense, right? So depending on the model that you're going to go, you can go through a CapEx model where you buy it all outright, which sometimes makes sense, a development ground up, or you're doing a big building improvement project, then it makes sense to actually do it maybe this way because it's all part of the project. But then if you're doing to an existing building and you're retrofitting it now with sensors, maybe an OpEx model is a little bit better for you. And then that way, those expenses are recoverable too. So we can build it back.
Thank you. Perfect. I have one last question, and then we need to get to the Q&A. The last question is, you've gathered all this data. Now what? What do you do with it?
So that's a great question. That's a question that comes. That's a loaded question too. But my CEO always says, okay, so we know all of these things. What are we going to do with it, right? So we're taking baby steps to it. At the beginning, we started with notification only. So we developed a KPIs for our buildings that actually give us thresholds that we are looking for, that we decided are the thresholds. And you'd be surprised that we want to be better than the air that is outside. Sometimes we can do it, sometimes we can't do it just because of capabilities of bringing in more or less fresh air into the building. But what we try to do is set those KPIs better than the air quality that is outside in many of the places, many of the occasions, and then get notifications when those thresholds are being met, and then call in our engineers so they can actually take action. We are working now, like I said before, on having that as an automated process. So being able to, when those thresholds are being met or getting close to, a big red button on my engineer's cell phone saying, would you like to make the modification now because you're reaching the threshold? And then the automation in the building itself will allow us to change those environmental qualities in real time. And hopefully as time moves, we can move it from a building automation to a customer automation, for a customer to be able to request these kind of things for themselves to be able to be changed.
That's great. Serene?
Yeah, so it's basically the same model with Ilan. We start with notification, based on the data. So we add and configure thresholds based on EPA standards or well building standards and whatnot to determine when you get notifications on the sensor reading if they exceed the threshold. So that's the first layer of notification. Then there's a layer of, okay, adding analytics, like I talked about the ventilation performance index. A lot of our customers may not know, oh, what does it mean that the PM and the VOC are high, and we can take multiple sensor data and create calculated analytics that is more actionable, that is consultative. It tells you, okay, the issue is related to ventilation and ventilation performance is low. So, you don't need to worry about the PM and the CO2 and whatnot. Especially that in some instances, someone comes in with a lot of perfume or whatever, and the VOC could spike, and then it's above the threshold, but that doesn't mean that there is an issue specifically. So we use analytics to really massage the data and give you something actionable when you need to do something. So that's the other layer we have, and then it's up to we do a lot of collaboration with our clients to help them create standard operating procedures around the different types of thresholds and the data and the sensors that we're getting. We do feel that technology alone is not enough to create a healthier environment and do something with the data. We cannot automate everything. And so, but we want to be part of the solution and talk about, okay, in these cases, it's an open a window solution. In this case, we send to the building automation system and change the set points there. In these cases, the building engineer needs to go and do something. So that's another thing that we try to be involved in and help our customers generate.
Perfect. Thank you, Serene. So I'm going to jump to the Q&A. We have a bunch, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. Mark asks, basically his question is, it's important to make sure that your building is healthy. Do we think that it's important for the collective organisms, aka the buildings next to you, to also be healthy as well? Serene,
I think that if there is any path between the buildings, if they're sharing anything along the way, then I would say yes. But if there is a clear separation with no contaminants, let's say, moving from one to the other, then I would say that it doesn't really matter. I mean, you really need to understand where the outtake of the air, the exhaust of the other building are, and where you're taking your air in. That if you are bringing it in from another building, that you're actually being able to clean it, purify it before it actually hits your building itself.
Thanks, Ilan. We have a question from David, and he specifically asked Ilan, as you're getting board approval, what are some of the wins that you shared with the board in order to gain their approval?
So we get that we're identifying HVAC sensors that are in place that are malfunctioning because they're very old, and the newer equipment is allowing us to check that. We're also gaining visibility into different gases that the existing HVAC system cannot detect. Temperature and humidity is the only thing that they can get. We also are finding that the thermostats were placed in wrong places. So rooms are actually too hot or too cold, or are not operating the way they're supposed to, because the existing thermostats we're putting in places where now they're getting beaten by, hit by through a window or through certain things. And so we're actually learning that our existing equipment is not in a very good place. Plus the whole level of automation and be able to be proactive before a facility management ticket gets opened up if somebody has a problem in the space.
Perfect. Serene, someone asked, Serene, you talked about your sensors working together on a mesh network. Can you give us some top 2 or 3 challenges a building may encounter when sensors are communicating with each other, and what's the solution?
Yeah, with the wireless mesh, you want to have a healthy distance between one transmitting device to the other. And so sometimes where you're collecting the data, for example, IAQ or energy, is too far from the next data point. And so to solve that for us, we have also a component called a node that is an extender of the wireless mesh. So that's basically typically is the challenge is that the data points, the sources of data that we want are not so close to each other, but that's kind of the solution around that, just to extend the wireless mesh through not a data collecting unit, but just an extender.
Perfect. The question says, Ilan, you said earlier that you flooded your buildings with sensors. Can you speak to what areas of the buildings you're monitoring and also to the HVAC systems? Thank you.
Yep. So we're building when I say amenity spaces, we're talking about lobbies. We have a lot of work areas that we are allowing our customers to go out and work in open areas. So all of those areas. We're talking about gyms. We're talking about the restrooms, the gym restrooms, the shower rooms, as well, locker rooms, as well as any public bathrooms that we have. And then we also have public conference rooms in the building itself. So those are also being monitored and looked at.
Perfect. Serene, this one's for you. What do you think about the IQ scores that some sensor companies are promoting?
I have a lot of thoughts around that. But I want to say that us as a company, just coming from a very science and engineering background, we do not believe in one score that fits all, because we do understand that, you know, it really depends. When you're trying to understand if a building is healthy or not, it really depends on the location of the building, the makeup of the building, what do they have in terms of equipment and strategies to improve indoor air quality. And so we feel that it's a little bit more custom and specific to the building than a generic score. So that's the approach we take with when we create any type of IAQ score. We take a lot of parameters in and not just the sensor data and averaging them and saying this is what it is. The other thing that we are working on is to also, you know, as we get more data from a specific region, you know, across clients and partners, to benchmark the buildings against each other to let them know, okay, well, you're in the same space, this place. And we actually had that situation where we had 2 buildings in DC, and they we were in July, and the bad air quality was coming our way from the West Coast due to the wildfire. And one building showed no degradation of air quality indoors, and the other building showed that it was affected by that bad outside air quality. And, you know, this is more meaningful to share with our clients, to say you're in the same region, similar buildings, why, you know, let's do something, and use that as a trigger and a scoring mechanism versus just a one size fits all.
Thank you. Ilan, this one's for you. What about the liability to building owners using IAQ sensors may present if the space has had poor air quality for a long time?
That's exactly the question that I was going to answer right now. I was typing out, but that is the biggest, that's a huge question. And it's so important, because we were at the point of actually projecting on bigger screens on how happy we are to show that our air quality is good and great. We even went to the level of being able to tie in our sensor data to our access control, meaning that if an air quality within a specific space is not working there, is not to the thresholds that we want, that the room gets locked, and that way people can't go in there until we address the situation. Now, you may think that that is great, but in reality, then our executives came in and said, well, what happens if somebody's in that room? So are you telling me that you're now in a polluted room and you're in a bad room and you're locking them either in the room, or you're not allowing new people to come in? what are we going to tell the people that are in there that we are giving them bad air to breathe? So we moved away from being able to tie it into access control. We moved away from being able to expose it to the customers until we understand a little bit more how we're going to approach it. We don't believe that at any given time, the air in our buildings is going to be fatal, that we get to the levels that it's fatal. We don't push out specific gases into our building that will make it fatal for you to live in that environment. Yes, it will get humid. Yes, it will get hotter than it's supposed to. Yes, there may be some more VOCs than others, which is a standard, which is a normal thing. You know, the best thing you can ever do to your building is implement an IAQ solution. The worst thing you can do to your building is also implement an IAQ solution, because now you know. But it will help us understand, and it will help us address the current situations. Like I said, we don't believe we will ever reach fatal levels, but we do know that that quality of air will go lower. We can never be low. We should never be lower than what is outside. And I think that the buildings were built in such a way that that will not happen. But our goal is to be better than what is outside.
Great. We have a few questions about needlepoint bipolar ionization. Serene, maybe you could quickly talk about, well, let's have Ilan start and just share, you know, your thoughts on your experience using that, and has it been effective? That's kind of the general gist of the questions.
So we did a couple of testing with that. We actually implemented it in our offices during the COVID time. I can tell you that the technology works, but we didn't really feel that it was suited for us. So we opted not to move forward on rollout on all of the other locations. It did help us very much when most of these systems don't come with sensors in place that you can actually understand the performance, or really what they're actually doing, and if they're doing the right thing at the right time. So our engineers used to be walking around with all these different machines to be able to test it. It really helped us when Senseware developed their own device that we can actually put it there, forget about it, and then look at it on a dashboard on a regular basis. It was very helpful to be able to measure it and see it. We weren't very sold with regards to the capabilities of it, at least within the commercial space.
Great. Serene, can you quickly talk about your IQI that Ilan mentioned for the folks asking?
Yeah, so it's an indoor air quality unit that incorporates ion sensing and counting as well. We developed that product as a result of a question that we keep getting around whether or not ionization works. And we're not the company to say that. That's not our role. We're just providing the data that helps determine and answer that question. So we've seen it used to, closer to the ionization, and also in the space to make sure that, ionization is reaching the areas that the manufacturers are saying, it should reach to clean the air, improve the indoor air quality. So we're checking that, we're validating with that sensor, the sensor data that's happening. And in addition to that, the result of using ionization to reduce number of particles in the air, is that happening? So there is a PM sensor that monitors that. VOC levels as well supposed to be reduced. Is that happening? So our unit is just giving answers to those types of questions and bringing visibility on effectiveness.
Perfect. I know we're getting close on time, but we have a few more, so I'll try to get to as many as we can. Ilan, the question is, besides IAQ, are there other sensors that are also important?
I think that there's a great book out there called Healthy Buildings, written by two Harvard professors. But when you look at a healthy building, IAQ is very, very important. But IAQ is a piece of IEQ. So when we look at vibration, and we look at sound, when we look at a lot of other components that are that build this whole safety environment, I believe that also lighting is very important, right? To be able to measure the Kelvin, the Kelvin temperature of the light within a room itself, because that also will help people be more productive or less productive, and you can achieve that through PoE lighting. So, there's a lot of other sensors that I would say that are important in addition to the IAQ to really give you a wellness package.
Perfect. Okay, one more question here is, Serene, what are the 3 most important characteristics of a sensor?
Yeah, for us, we get sensors from the original innovator of that sensor technology. So that's very important. That means that we get the latest innovation, we get the highest quality, which is the second point. And then the accuracy of the sensor is the third thing that I want to say.
Perfect, thank you. So we have a couple more. Ilan and Serene, do you have a hard stop? If it's okay if you do, but
it's okay. We can continue a little bit. Yeah,
a little bit longer. Okay, perfect. The question is around what are the metrics to be monitored with IAQ from Alex Thomas?
So when you're looking at IAQ, we're looking at really at 6 different components. We're looking at the air quality. We're looking at the CO2. We're looking at humidity, PM 2.5, PM10, and then we're also looking at ozone. But again, those would be the critical components that you would want to see when you're looking at an IAQ sensor.
Perfect, thank you. Ilan, the question is from Francis, and you kind of addressed it earlier, but he's asking about, do you display the data in the actual space in a kiosk or in the lobby?
So we have our own mobile application that we developed, our Carr mobile experience. We developed the module that allows us to bring that data in and be able to display it there. We also have, we built a dashboard that allows us to show our customers the data and project it either in the lobby or give it to them in another way. We opted not right now, just because, first of all, we're gonna tap on our shoulder that they're gonna see everything green most of the time, if not all of the time. So it's gonna be boring for them to see it, and there's no insights really on the data of what is going on. What makes more sense is an over time kind of component. Also, we're still struggling with the fact of what happens if it degradates, right? What happens if it goes down a little bit? What are the questions? What are the liabilities to show? Again, we don't believe it's going to go into the fatal side of it, but it's going to go into the point where it's going to raise questions. So as an owner operator, in one way, you don't have a problem with the transparency, but another way, you also want to protect yourself and understand how you're going to approach that. And we're still at that phase.
Perfect, thank you. Serene, how do you deal with sensor accuracy degradation over time?
So I talked about the algorithm that we developed that would detect drift on the accuracy levels of the sensor. And once that happens, we just replace the sensor. So send that back and get it replaced. A lot of the sensors we try to use also latest sensors, and a lot of the later ones are self-calibrating sensors. So that's a new thing that's in the market. So we try to integrate with those sensors as much as possible.
Perfect. Ilan, the questions about ozone levels, were you surprised when you started using the ozone sensor of what the levels were in your buildings?
We were not. Our engineers were able to already measure ozone through handheld devices. So we were in good standings with ozone. We didn't have a problem with ozone. But again, those are things that you do want to measure and you do want to be able to look at. And that's why when we look at all of the sensors that we're deploying out there, ozone is one of the less important for us, just because we know that we don't have any devices in place today that emit high levels of ozone that could put us at that risk.
Perfect, thank you. And then there's a question about what are the technologies you use to filter the air, Ilan?
So we use, today we use UVGI. We deployed UVGI across all of our portfolio, as well as MERV 13s in all of our buildings. So we have that on the base building systems. We are testing out something now that is called Aura Air, which does a filtration at the edge. And I think that it's an emerging trend right now where companies are actually looking, and we're doing also that in a couple of our spaces where we're doing building like a co-working kind of environment where we're putting the filtration, not the filtration at the edge, right there at the space itself. So high-end MERV filters in the space, so the air doesn't have to circulate all the way up to the roof, circulate itself, and come back down. It actually gets done at the space itself.
Perfect, thank you. And Serene, I think this can be the last one, so we'll end at 1:05, not too much over. It's a question about the wildfires, folks, and if you could share an example of how a building affected by wildfires, how their KPIs were impacted.
Yeah, so we had, that's actually a reason we developed the indoor air quality solution was a response to a client that was in the West Coast affected by the wildfire. So the package included CO2, temperature humidity, CO2, PMN, and VOC. And we looked at, for the wildfire specifically, the issue was how much outside air should we bring before it becomes really bad indoors. So just helping balance that. So the CO2 levels and the PM levels were a way to help determine the right configuration. So that's how we help in that instance.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. I know we have a few more, but I'm gonna make sure that we answer those via email. So we'll get back to the folks that asked a question but haven't had a chance to get it answered yet. This was so wonderful, and we had so much participation. It feels like this needs to be a series of sorts where we do this weekly almost. But I'm so glad that there was just so much participation and that you two were here and gracious with your time. And Ilan, I appreciate you answering questions, in the midst of it, because we had, it seems, over 40 questions, which is incredible. So thank you both so much. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Implement IAQ sensors. It is very important. Don't be overwhelmed. Take your time, and you'll be surprised from the data, and it will be very useful.
Serene, how about you? Any final thoughts?
I just want to say that, a lot of people think, sensors and IoT is this difficult thing to implement, but there's technology that's out there that's easy, and just don't, try to look and figure out a way to do it. It's possible.
Perfect. Well, thank you for everyone. We've gotten also so many nice messages. I really appreciate that. It's very kind of all of you for saying such kind words to them and us. So thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay tuned. We will continue to be doing these on a monthly basis. We have another one next month. So you can sign up for our newsletter. And obviously you can follow Serene and Ilan on LinkedIn. They're always posting helpful information and new articles. They're thought leaders, obviously, in their own right. So you will enjoy their content as well. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great week.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ilan.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.